If you are the capable one, the reliable one, the one people turn to when things fall apart, then this episode might feel uncomfortably familiar. You don't struggle because you're incapable. You struggle because you're exceptionally competent. And at some point, competence may have stopped being something you do and quietly became who you are. Today, we're going to talk about the high functioning trap and what happens when your greatest strength becomes your only identity. Welcome to the Power to Flourish podcast, where science meets the art of a beautiful life. I'm Dr. Andrea Line, positive psychologist, giftedness expert and coach, and modern-day spiritual godmother to brilliant, deep-feeling women. This isn't just another self-help podcast. It's a sanctuary, a sacred space to come back to yourself. Each week, we'll explore the emotional experience of gifted, sensitive women and what it means to live a life that feels as beautiful as it may look. Because flourishing isn't a luxury, it's your birthright, and your life is waiting. This is the Power to Flourish podcast. Welcome back to the Power to Flourish podcast. I am Dr. Andrea Line, and today we are diving into the identity of the high-functioning woman. So first, who are these high-functioning women? Are you a high-functioning woman? Usually, high-functioning women are not struggling on the surface. They're productive, responsible, usually emotionally aware. They're usually admired by other people. They are the ones who, again, from the outside, on the surface, appear like everything is going really well. They're high functioning. But underneath that competence, for some of them, and this may be you, there is often this like subtle contract, which is this: if I stay useful, I stay safe. And this obviously is not conscious, typically. Usually when we become conscious of these contracts, we change. Because staying useful all the time and being productive and being responsible and being the go-to person is exhausting at a certain point. The thing is, the nervous system, it loves predictability. And competence creates predictability, at least some sense of it, right? Because when you can anticipate outcomes and you can effectively solve problems and you know how to manage your emotions or the emotions of everyone around you, and you know how to carry the weight and the responsibility, you reduce uncertainty for yourself. Do you not? For many of us, especially those of us who were praised very early on and or throughout our life and our childhood for our maturity and our intelligence, or perhaps it was our level of responsibility or our natural leadership abilities at a young age, competence becomes the fastest path to safety and security. In this picture, especially if you think of yourself or even just any child, but think of yourself as a child if this is you. Achievement regulates anxiety. Productivity helps to reduce ambiguity, the things that we just can't control. And being indispensable reduces relational risk. Oh my goodness, you guys. Every single one of those I have lived out. Every single one. And if you are listening to this podcast and you've been listening for a while, this probably describes you, or it describes how you've been at some point. And I want you to hear this so clearly, because it's never my intention when I point things out like this to make anyone feel bad about themselves, to pathologize anyone. Truly not my goal here. I'm painting the picture so you can understand it. And I don't pathologize this at all. I don't think this is anything we have to, diagnose and or quote unquote fix, because I really do see it as adaptive. It clearly worked. Otherwise, we would have stopped doing it a long time ago, but it got certain needs met. And so we keep doing it. It works to a certain extent, or it works for a certain period of time. But over time, if we're not careful, if we're not aware, something subtle can start to shift and happen. And I find this a lot with gifted women. And truly, you could be listening to this and you're 31 years old or 38 years old, or you might be 58, or you might be 69. This can happen to any of us. And until we become very aware and make a shift, a conscious shift, this is unfortunately what can happen. You no longer just do competence, right? It's not just like something you can do. It literally becomes your identity. You become the quote competent one. That's your identity. That's how people see you. That's how you see yourself. And once it becomes identity, stepping outside of it feels extraordinarily destabilizing. Am I right? You may be listening right now and you're like, I don't really know because I've never stepped out of it, because that would sound crazy to do that. I mean, think about this. Just sit with this. What would happen? Ask yourself this. What would happen if I wasn't the strong one? If I wasn't the reliable one? What would happen if I wasn't the one holding everything together? That might be destabilizing even to think about if you haven't already stepped beyond this as an identity. And that's what I want to talk about today. Because when identity narrows around capability, when that becomes basically your core identity, there is less room for vulnerability. There's less room for play. There's not a whole lot of room for confusion or even desire. You probably don't even think of it in terms of those things, right? Or need. Everything is revolving around competence and capability. And all those other things kind of get put on the back burner. So what is the cost? What is the real cost of the high functioning identity? I think it can show up in a lot of different ways, but I'm going to name a few and see if any of this resonates. It can look like exhaustion that isn't necessarily the same as burnout. It's not quite the same. It can look like relational imbalance. The cost of a high functioning identity could be difficulty receiving. These are all things that we've talked about at different times on the podcast. Can look like quiet, or maybe not so quiet, resentment. If you're someone who feels resentful a lot of the time, I would ask yourself, is this part of it? Could this be part of it? It could look like a loss of spontaneity, play, fun, because how can you have fun when you've got to be the capable one? There's no time for fun. There's not a whole lot of time for fun because someone's got to make it all come together, right? And here's one that sometimes we don't even permit ourselves to admit. We don't permit to admit to ourselves, is this fear of being seen as needy. I said it that way, like we don't permit ourselves to admit, because I can tell you, when I was younger, I did not think I was needy. I didn't want to be seen as needy, but I also was like, I'm not needy. And in many ways, it was true. But in some ways, that was not true at all. I was extremely needy underneath it. And I had this hardened shell over it that was so hardened and had been there for so long. I believed it. And one of the shocking things that happened is once I started softening, all these needs came out. It was like, oh my God, I'm needy underneath it all. And I didn't like that, But I had to like go through that phase of it to get to the other side where I wasn't needy like that anymore. It's like these are phases. It can freak you out at first if you're not prepared. But anyway, that's why I said it the way I did. We don't permit ourselves to admit. It's like we just can't admit it to ourselves. And I'm just tying this in a little bit to what I talked about last week. Last week's episode, I was talking about awe and just creating moments in our life. And so when we have this identity, if we're clinging to it, or if we just haven't even been aware yet to like step out of it, when that competence really dominates, then I mean, think about it. Awe, beauty, all these things that I like talking about, it feels inefficient. It feels, this is why I say over and over again, these are not luxuries. Flourishing cannot be thought of as a luxury. Beauty, art, creativity, awe, like all of these things, when you are looking at life through the lens of I'm capable, I'm responsible, I'm optimizing, I'm efficient, blah, 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 right? All of these other things I'm talking about, I mean, you would laugh because where is there room for that? It's inefficient. There's no room for that. We don't have time for that, right? You have to be able to shift your mindset. Why these things are important. When competence dominates, then vulnerability feels risky. I mean, it feels risky anyway, but if your whole identity is based on being the strong one, you understand what I mean, that vulnerability feels risky. It's not just risky like relationally. It's risky because your whole identity will crumble if being strong and competent is the identity. If being superwoman is the identity, then you literally cannot be vulnerable. It doesn't fit with the identity. And rest, oh my goodness. A competent, high-functioning identity doesn't need rest. Or even if you think you do need rest, it feels undeserved. Right? So these are all costs of the high-functioning identity. So how do we move beyond this trap without necessarily dismantling completely our actual competence? Because we are competent, we are responsible, we're gifted, we can do things, right? But how do we move beyond this trap? Because the competence isn't necessarily the problem. So it's really important. I want you to hear that. I am not suggesting that we be anti-competent. And I don't even know if I would say I'm suggesting to be that, that I'm anti-high functioning, depending on how you want to think about that. But I do want to suggest that there is a very important place where we unlink, we detach our competence, our skill, our abilities, our gifts and our talents from our core identity, right? So the goal is not to become less capable, but it is to widen our identity, to have it encompass more. You are more than your usefulness. I hope you know that. I hope you believe that. We may know it cognitively, by the way, but not really know it deep down inside. Right? We may know, yes, I'm more than my productivity, or, if you're younger, I remember being like, I'm more than my good grades, my straight A's, or whatever. It's like you might know that is the truth, but you don't really know it, because if you really knew it, you'd live differently. So I want to offer in closing 3 small little practices. So if you struggle with this, you're not going to change it all overnight, but I do want you to become aware. Awareness is a really important first step before we try to change anything. Awareness, super important. So 3 practices. Number 1, allow small, visible, this is the important part, visible incompetence. That is a fancier way of saying this simply. Do something you're not good at. Just do something that is visibly like you're not good at it. This memory just popped into my head. Many, many years ago, I decided I was going to take I don't know if it was really a gardening class. It was like a landscaping or something like that. I was really interested. I was designing and redoing our garden around our house. And it was really for people, I think a lot of people in that class were professionals or wanted to become professional. I was the least experienced, knowledgeable person in the room. And I was used to being in rooms where my expertise in my area was, it was present and acknowledged. And in this room, it was this little, community center garden. We were talking about gardening. I knew nothing. I was, it was like a joke when I was in that class. And it was a little uncomfortable for me, which sounds a little silly now looking back on it. It's like, who cares? But at the time, I decided I invested money and time to take a class that, was brand new for me. And people in the class, like they saw my incompetence. So, but again, in the big scheme of life, me learning to garden, my world wasn't going to collapse if I didn't know the answer to something, right? So that's just a funny example, but it could be anything. But allow yourself some area in your life where you are learning something new. Or maybe you're not even learning something new. Maybe it's just something like you've never really been good at it and you just avoid doing it because you know you're not good at it. Right? We do this. We're so funny. So you know what that thing is. And I want you to do it. I want you to do the thing you're not good at. And come with some lightheartedness around it if you can. Okay, the second practice is practice. This is a good one. Practice receiving help. Here's the key, without over reciprocating. That's the part. I mean, you may already have a hard time receiving help. So practice receiving the help, but then stop yourself. You do not go into that place of I've got to reciprocate and then just like, one up the person. Don't do that. Don't do that. We are practicing getting help. We are practicing not being competent at 110% of the time. Okay, last practice is share one uncertainty without immediately resolving it. Maybe you're having a conversation with a friend or a partner or even just yourself in your journal, and allow yourself. Stay in that uncertainty. Don't rush to have to, just practice not rushing to resolve it immediately. These are identity expanding micro movements. Most of the time, things that I'm going to share on here are going to be really small little action steps. Your identity is not going to be reworked, in overnight, certainly, and not by doing these little things once. But these are over time. You're going beyond your current identity. If this is something you struggle with, we're going to do this in micro steps. So I will repeat them just really quickly. So you remember, number 1, allow small, visible incompetence. Number 2, practice receiving help without over reciprocating. And the last one, share one uncertainty without immediately resolving it. And lastly, I invite you to journal, ask yourself these questions. Again, if this is something you're still struggling with, like, I don't want this to be my identity, but if I'm being honest with myself, I do still struggle, and that's okay. So here are some questions that you can ask yourself when you have a moment. Who were you before you were the competent one? Can you even think back that far? Can you remember? Who were you? Where did capability become protection? And finally, what parts of you have been sidelined in service of certainty, of stability, of predictability, all the things? What parts of you have been sidelined? And I want to close just by saying competence can be a gift. We need competent people. And you shouldn't be ashamed of your competence. It's a beautiful thing. But it was never meant to be your entire identity. You're allowed to be powerful and weak and vulnerable. You're allowed to be capable and curious and not have the answers to everything. You're allowed to be reliable and stable and also spontaneous and alive. You get to be all of those things. A rich, full expression of who you were created to be. I hope this episode, as always, served you well. And would you do me a favor if you feel like you know someone in your life and maybe they seem like they might struggle with this high functioning identity? Do a loving thing and forward this to them. I hope it serves you. I hope it serves them. And I look forward to meeting you right back here on the podcast next week. Until then, keep flourishing. Thank you for listening to the Power to Flourish podcast. I hope today's conversation left you feeling more seen, more supported, and more deeply connected to yourself. And if this episode resonated, would you take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a friend? It's one of the best ways to help this work reach the women who need it most. You'll find show notes, links, and resources from today's episode at powertoflourish.com. And now just a quick reminder, this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It's not therapy, medical advice, or a substitute for professional support. And listening doesn't make me your therapist or doctor, though if you're looking for a coach, you know where to find me. All right, beautiful one, that's it for now. Until next time, trust yourself, honor your gifts, and keep flourishing.